I think of hats as a form of occupational health and safety wear, in my case, given that I burn in the sun so easily. So if you see me with a hat, it's not necessarily for fashion conscious purposes, although I have to say that the artist in me enjoys the opportunity of a hat in the form of its potential disruption of expectations. So I have an interesting collection of hats. So I was born in Johannesburg in the 70s, and my parents moved around. I wouldn't say a lot, but often enough, and eventually I was on a farm with them growing up between Witbank and Middelburg in what was then the Transvaal, and had to catch a bus at 5 in the mornings to get to school because there wasn't a way of getting to the school every day except with that kind of transport. And those were quite solitary years. You know, I was a only child, so there weren't any siblings to play with. And by the end of the primary school period, my parents decided that I think I wasn't socializing enough or becoming socialized enough. So they sent me off to boarding school in Pretoria. And that was the Catholic school in the days when corporal punishment and violence in schools was still normal, and it was quite a brutal space, an excellent academic education, but quite a brutal space to be in. So you really had to learn to survive by forming close friendships with people who would support you there, you know. It was very clear to me as a young gay adolescent that should you dare to come out in that kind of space, you risked your life. You risked taking your life. And I remember one of my contemporaries in that school, a little bit younger than me, 2 grades down I think it was, who took the risk of coming out in that boys only boarding school environment, and it provoked extremes in terms of masculine violence, men's violence. And that experience of watching what happened to somebody's life being destroyed in that place made me very fearful about coming out as a gay person. But it also made me realize that nothing was going to change unless I stepped out and helped make it change. And as I grew up at university then, I mean, talking about the UKZN days and so on, I made that conscious decision to be openly out as a gay man. And there was enormous solidarity to be found in it, I have to say. Women and other gay people were most sympathetic to that courage, and most supportive. And perhaps that also said something about the instinct that I had, that if you belonged to a group that was oppressed, if you belonged to a race group that was oppressed, or a gender group that was oppressed, there was the potential of solidarity in it. It wasn't a defeated position being in those marginal groups. It wasn't a position of defeat. It could be a position of solidarity, camaraderie, and joint purpose. And that solidarity was across genders. So if I think about leading, it was always leading for change. It could not be any other kind of leading. For somebody like me, or for the women around me who were also strong leaders, or for the black people around me who were also strong leaders. It was enormously courageous in those early years to be authentically leading from the position of marginalization that you were in. So my friends came from very different backgrounds. And because we were all in boarding, I think it was probably the solidarity of the oppressed in many ways, because not only were we not part of the kind of mainstream in the school, but we also came from very different race kind of backgrounds. So that was a tough few years, I have to say, but absolutely formative. It was there where I learned a very core sense of self-discipline, a keen academic interest. The academics became like a kind of alternative to that sport culture, and my interest in languages developed at that stage in my life. So when we talk about a place where Africanization of the curriculum, decoloniality, decolonization, multilingualism, gender and diversity could make sense in terms of coming together, that is what UWC represents for me. And I think what it means to be at UWC has got to be one of the fundamental questions for us going forward in the next 5 years. What that could mean intellectually as a project of the institution, what it could mean for our students and their experience of learning in our classrooms and living in our residences and being on our campuses and being in our communities, which are sometimes rough and violent places to live, to rethink what it means to be at UWC at this important point in our history, and to turn that into an opportunity for the university to reposition itself. Yeah.
As you know, many of our students are from very diverse, but often marginalised backgrounds.
Yeah.
How would you, as a leader, ensure that the students who are from marginalised backgrounds, speaking about the disabled, the LGBTQ
groups,
IA plus community, women, how would you ensure that, they thrive in this space?
So I think what's important to recognize in those three groups that you've mentioned is that the three share many, many things in common. There is a need in those three groups for recognition, for opportunity, for development. And in a sense, those three represent an opportunity of restitution. Restitution is really important. In other words, the opportunity to achieve redress of the imbalances of the past exists should we as an institution create that opportunity. So I would want in the next 5 years to look at how we as university create opportunities for those three groups you've identified to thrive and grow. And that needs intention rather than only goodwill. I think at UWC we will find among us a well of goodwill and good intention, which is necessarily a beginning for any initiative, I have to say. But it needs careful planning and it needs intention to create those opportunities for women and LGBT people. And of course, for our first generation students, whom you rightly point out, come from homes where that kind of access to education has never been in the history of their development, never been in the history of growth. So recognize it for what it is, see it for what it is, as an opportunity for redress, and then plan to create the new opportunities to attend to it. One of the roles that leadership must confront is the reconciliation of what sometimes feel like extreme polarities, oppositions to each other, to yourself, and being able to kind of bring those together, to bring a degree of maybe harmony to it, and that's not easy. So the beginnings of my leadership experience were always kind of couched in contest, conflict, and a lack of acceptance, a refusal to accept. And that made it also courageous. I come back to this word because when you move into an environment where you feel that you might not be accepted, and many people do not in fact accept you, it says something about the place that you're moving into. It says quite a lot about you as a person, and somewhere between the place and the space and yourself, you have to find a middle ground where both can come together, where reconciliation of both becomes possible, yourself and the environment. So leadership is about change. It's about a new horizon. It's necessarily about bringing harmony to areas of deep conflict and division. And you don't always succeed. So I also think of, many times where I failed in it, where I feel that it's been a failure, But I think that's part of the learning. I think understanding the value of failure, the value of hardship in it, is also a way of developing your resilience. And again, it's not a highly, I have to say, not a highly individualized sense of leading. It cannot be about ego. Leadership cannot be about ego. It has got to be about community. So even if you are coming in from the outside, or you are even growing in an institution coming from within, an outsider, you are about the creation of a harmony, ultimately. And you have to accept that that is going to be difficult and probably characterized by failures in as much as it is characterized by successes. So in leading courageously, if I could talk about that a little, I think one must be humble enough to accept that failure is necessarily a part of the path you're on. And learning from failure is a part of the path you're on. And learning from other people's success around you is a part of the path you're on. It's not about you so much as it's about understanding time, space, and circumstance, and how those come together. And I think authenticity is important. We'll come back to this notion of authenticity in leadership, because it inspires in others also willingness to be authentic. And I think that, in that sense, authenticity is about vulnerability rather than this is who I am and you've got to accept me for who I am. It's about recognizing that you are vulnerable, and that being authentic means you need to be aware that your vulnerabilities are precisely the areas where you can best change. If you're authentic about it, there is the opportunity where you can best change yourself. And that is a wonderful thing about leading, and leading in academic spaces particularly makes it even more wonderful, if I could put it like that, because you have a group of people around you, your academic staff, your support staff, your students, who are all devoted to learning, who love learning. So imagine how wonderful it must be to be in a place where everybody loves the same thing. Everybody loves learning. You wouldn't be there unless you loved to learn. So that love of learning is like the soil in which the change happens.